Dobro jutro vsem. Hvala Miletu Đurđeviću za uvod v današnji drugi dan simpozija. Za nami je prvi dan simpozija, ki je vse nas zagotovo nagovoril, kako pomembno je vključevanje in združevanje skozi glasbo. To smo še posebej začutili na včerajšnjem koncertu, ki ga sama znova in znova podoživljam. Vsem, ki aktivno sodelujete, se prav posebej zahvaljujem, da s svojimi prispevki in delavnicami skupaj z nami razvijate in bogatite raziskovalno delo na področju glasbe. Letos je prvič vzporedno s simpozijem potekal tudi študentski forum, na katerem smo gostili študente in kolege iz Univerze Guštava Mahlerja iz Celovca. Oba dogodka sta se vsebinsko povezovala in v nekaterih delih tudi združevala. Akademija za glasbo Univerze v Ljubljani bo v mesecu marcu prihodnjega leta gostila tudi mednarodno konferenco IPARN, na kateri bo v ospredju umetniško raziskovanje. Tako se bo znanstveno-raziskovalna dejavnost razširila tudi na umetniško področje. Prepričana sem, da je to pomembno tako za bodoče generacije mladih glasbenikov, kot tudi za širši družbeni prostor. Že danes prav lepo vabljeni. Danes smo še posebej počaščeni, da je z nami dr. Adam Ockelford, ki bo z nami delil izkušnje in znanje. Dr. Adam Ockelford je profesor na Univerzi v Roehamptonu v Londonu. Njegovo področje raziskovanja je glasbena psihologija, osredotočena na razvoj glasbenih sposobnosti pri slepih in osebah z avtizmom. S svojimi predavanji gostuje po vsem svetu in je avtor številnih člankov. Za izvedbo današnjega online predavanja se še posebej zahvaljujem naši tehnični ekipi. Dear colleagues, students and guests, the first day of the symposium is behind us that highlighted the importance of inclusion and unification through music. We especially felt this yesterday's concert. I would like to express my special thanks to all of you who actively participate at this symposium for developing and enriching research in the field of music. This year, for the first time, a students' forum was held in parallel with the symposium, where we were hosting students and colleagues from the Gustav Mahler University from Klagenfurt. The content of both events was connected and in some parts combined. In March 2024, the Academy of Music will host the international conference IPARN, at which artistic research will be in the foreground. So the scientific research activity will also be extended to artistic research. I believe that this is important both for future generations of young musicians and for the wider social space. On this occasion, I would like to invite you all to join us at this exciting conference as well. Today we are especially honored to have Dr. Adam Ockelforda with us. He is a professor of music at the University of Roehampton in London. His research focuses on music psychology, in particular the development of special music abilities in the context of blindness in autism, areas about which he has written widely and lectures all over the world. I believe that we have an interesting lecture ahead of us. So, without further ado, I'm giving the word to Adam Ockelforda. Thank you.
Okay, Adam, you're on. Hello. Okay, some technical difficulties. Adam, can you hear us? Oh, hello, you're on.
Great. Shall I start?
Yep, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Very sorry I can't be with you today. but it's good that at least we have an online possibility. So today I want to talk about music and inclusion, and to say that music really is the natural language that we all share.
Recording in progress.
Every week I work with about 20 children on the autism spectrum, and I'd like to start by introducing you to a young woman now, who I've worked with for the last 15 years or so. This is Romy. When Romy was a little girl, when she was 3 years old, her father took this video of her teaching herself to play the keyboard. Romy unfortunately had an accident at birth. So she had a lot of brain damage due to a hospital error. And that meant that for her, words and speech didn't really mean anything. But she discovered that music for her was a natural language. And Romy started to teach herself to play the keyboard. Here she is in action. Whoops, I hope. There you are. As you can see, Romy had taught herself to play using one hand, which was her stronger hand. The challenge with Romy really was the fact that she didn't like to share her music with anybody else. So when she realized that her father was filming her, as you can see, she stopped playing and went out the room. So I met Romy when she was about 8 years old. And the big challenge was getting her to realize that music making with someone else could be fun and a way of communicating and a way of forming a relationship. With many of the autistic children I work with, I use 2 pianos because then we don't have to fight over the shared space. And here is Romy when she was about 12 years old. You can see how she uses music as a language to communicate. She uses fragments of tunes to have a dialogue with me in sound. Here she is. I danced in the moon. and so on. So you can see how Romy is now happy to share her music with someone else. You can see how she uses little fragments of music, almost like words. Romy can't speak at all, and yet she can communicate very effectively through music. And so really, for me, Romy illustrates something very important, that being musical is part of being human, and that all children are musical, including even those with the most complex needs. And in fact, for some children, like Romy, music may be the most important way of interacting with other people. Now, over 20 years ago, I set up the Sounds of Intent project, which really was established to celebrate children's engagement with music right across the spectrum of neurodiversity, and to help teachers and parents who work with those children. Sounds of Intent arose from a study that colleagues here in London did of special school music provision. And it became evident that no one had really tried to work out just how it is that children with learning difficulties develop musically. And so the Sounds of Intent project was set up to meet that need. Sounds of Intent sets out a fully inclusive framework of how we all develop musically. So while it applies to children with the most complex needs, it also applies to very able children as well. It's there for everybody. And the approach we took was just to sit and to listen and to watch what children did. And we made hundreds of observations of children in action. And we tried to figure out what was happening. For example, did certain ways of engaging with music develop before other ways? Did certain skills have to be in place before others could develop? And still today, Sounds of Intent is very much based on observation. We built a website which had over 12 million visitors in 10 years and over 3 million downloads of materials. And in the UK, about 80% of special schools for children with learning difficulties are using the Sounds of Intent framework in one way or another. And indeed in lots of other countries too. Sounds of Intent has been translated into German, Dutch, French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, and so on. So it really is, I hope, helping children across the world. We now have a new website, which we built in the last year or so, which you're very welcome to visit. It's at there, www.soundsofintent.app. On the website, there are a lot of freely available resources and ideas for you to use with the children you work with. So here is a quick outline of the Sounds of Intent framework. Sounds of Intent identifies 6 levels of musical engagement that occur in the same sequence as children grow up. It's possible to say at what age neurotypical children develop these skills. And level 1 is really before hearing gets going. I call it learning to hear. And this usually happens 3 months before birth. So when we're born, our hearing is already very good. The second level is called Sounds Interesting. And this is about hearing sound as a sensory experience. Usually in typical development, this phase lasts from around 3 months before birth to around 9 months old. Very quickly, children learn to imitate and they learn to enjoy being copied. And this level is called copy me, copy you. It's about recognizing simple patterns in sound. It's about anticipating, and it's about copying. This usually happens from around 9 months to around 15 months. With children with learning difficulties, this can be children with severe or profound learning difficulties, which may include autism. Level 4, I call bits of pieces. This is when musical notes become grouped into chunks. Things like mobile phone ringtones, for example, or the sound of the doorbell, or the sound of an advert on television or online. This is a magical phase when music really gets going. And children typically are in this phase from around 15 months to around 33 months. Level 5 is called whole songs in time and in tune. At this level, children get a sense of being able to sing in time and in tune with others. They develop a sense of the tonal framework of their culture. This happens usually from around 33 months onwards. And finally, at level 6, children get a sense of the wider cultural and social impact of music and its capacity to communicate emotions. This usually happens in the teenage years. Now, if you look at the right-hand column, you'll see that even children with severe learning difficulties can be at level 6. Having a disability is no barrier to making music. It's a very, very important point. It's also important to remember that sounds of intent levels should not be thought of as stages where one set of abilities replaces another set of abilities. Each level builds on those that go before, and in reality, of course, children's development is quite fuzzy. It varies from day to day. It varies even from hour to hour sometimes. So children don't fit into boxes, but sounds of intent helps map a picture of children's musical engagement. So, in addition to the 6 levels, sounds of intent identifies 3 different ways in which we make music or which we engage with music. These are called domains. And in the Sounds of Intent project, they're called reactive, proactive, and interactive. And they use the same color coding, which you'll see on the website when you visit. Reactive is about listening and responding to sounds and music. Proactive is about making sounds and singing and playing on your own. Interactive is about making sounds and making music with other people. So in a way, interactive is reactive plus proactive. But really, it's more than that. Interactive is more than the sum of its parts. Interactive really lies at the heart of children's music making. So if we map the 6 levels across the 3 domains, we get a model, a framework, which can be pictured like this. Here's level 1 across the reactive, proactive, and interactive domains. In the reactive domain at level 1, children encounter sounds. The sounds are there, but they don't perceive them. They may make sounds accidentally by breathing, for example. And they may interact with other people accidentally without realizing what they're doing. Level 2 is about the sensory stage, as we said. It's about an emerging awareness of sound as something to be enjoyed, something to be relished. Proactive is about intentionality. It's about realizing that I can make a sound by something I do. And interactive is about self and other. It's about being aware of other people through sound making. Level 3 is all about imitation. It's about pattern. It's about predictability. And it's about imitation, awareness of others through copying what they do. So this really is the beginnings of empathy, of being able to understand what it's like to be someone else. Because if you can copy the sounds they make, then maybe you have a little insight into what it's like to be them. Level 4 is those chunks or memes or riffs or licks. It's about groups of sound. And really, it's about groups of sound that make music what it is. If you think of a particular piece of music, the thing that comes to mind is the main theme, the main tune, the main motif. And that's how we store music in the brain. So at level 4, children may be doing call and response activities, for example. They may be starting to create longer pieces by repeating the same motif over again. Or they may be linking motifs to make their own pieces. Level 5 is about short and simple pieces of music as a whole. It's about an awareness of tonality, an awareness of meter, of whether a piece is in 3/time or 4/time or 6/8 time, of the groove, as jazz musicians would call it. And it's about really starting to have the ability to perform with other people, singing together songs, for example, or playing together in a group. And finally, there's level 6. It's about an emotional, social, and cultural understanding of the impact of music, of where my music making fits in the wider world and in the society in which I live. Right, I'll give you some examples now of each of those levels in action. So here's level 1. So, as we said, the human auditory system, our hearing, usually develops 3 months before birth. But in some people with profound developmental delay, it may not yet have switched itself on. And in other people with a brain injury or with a deterioration, such as a neurodegenerative disease, their hearing may not be working. Just a couple of examples from my own work. The top picture is of Ellie, who had severe cerebral palsy, and she required very loud sounds in order to get her hearing going. I worked with her for a long time, trying quiet sounds, trying to be subtle, but she made no response. But then her mother told me she really likes very, very loud sounds. So I made a huge crash on a cymbal, and Ellie perked up and she smiled for the first time I'd seen her. And then her brain was in action. Then she could hear other sounds too. The second young woman is Abby. Abby very sadly was losing the ability to speak, to move, to do anything. She had a very short life through neurodegenerative disease. When I worked with Abby, she was about 16, and it seemed as though she couldn't respond to music at all. She couldn't make music. But her parents believed that she was still hearing music in her head. And so we used this piece of specialist technology called a sound beam. A sound beam is an invisible beam in the air, but when you move, when you break the beam with your hand or your head or your leg, any body part, it controls a MIDI device. So you can make music just with the tiniest movement of your finger. And we discovered by letting Abby try the sound beam, just with using her finger, that she could not only play in time, she could even copy the sounds we were making. It was really quite extraordinary, and it greatly enriched the end of her life. Level 2 is about awareness of sound, awareness of other people through sound. But there's not yet any sense of pattern or predictability. So I'd like to give you an example of working with children like this. This is Shafiq, who has profound and multiple learning difficulties. He's interacting with his teacher just by scratching his tray on his wheelchair. And the teacher is making sounds by rubbing the microphone on the tray. And you can see, even with this very simple interaction, the emotional engagement, the real sense that here is someone else and I can have fun. And it's all done through the simplest of means.
Come on. Your turn. My turn.
I always say to people when they start out in this field that you don't need to be complicated. Sometimes just a simple sound is all it takes to connect to someone else. Right, level 3 is called Copy Me, Copy You. It's about that recognition of patterns. It's about the ability to repeat sounds and to make a regular beat. And above all, it's about imitating others and being aware of people copying us. It's that bonding through imitation. Here's a lovely example of a music therapist working with a girl called A, who's about 10 years old. A, like Romy, is non-verbal, but she can have a dialogue in sound when the music therapist copies what she does. And you can see how Pat, the therapist, makes a piece of music from A's sounds just by copying them and repeating them. And the effect for A is wonderful. Again, she has a sense that here is someone else, here is someone who really understands me. So you can see how Pat wove her sounds into a piece of music and the wonderful dialogue that resulted. Level 4, you will remember, is about groups of sounds, about chunks. My children call them memes. these little catchy phrases that are all over the internet. And really, as we said, it's motifs that make a piece of music what it is. And gradually, they also get to learn how to stitch motifs together into short pieces of music. I always think level 4 is a very typically autistic stage, because autistic children love to repeat short bursts of music. And here is another picture of Romy. Romy, at this age, when she was about 13 or 14, became obsessed with particular motifs and would keep hearing them over and over again. And Romy never got bored. We've done research that shows that autistic children like Romy are just as emotionally engaged the 100th time they hear something as the first time. It's like they have a switch in their brain that says, this is the thing for the first time. I'm not, you know, it's so fresh and so emotionally engaging. And you can see Romy's pleasure, the way that she makes movements, the way the music is embodied in her actions. Here she is. Lovely instrument, isn't it, Ross? Finally, we get the rest of the melody from Smetana. But it's lovely. One of the myths, I think, one of the misunderstandings of autistic children is that they don't engage emotionally with music or with people. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. People like Romy are immensely emotionally bought into the idea of music. And for her, it's by far the most important experience of her life. Level 5 is about whole pieces of music in time and in tune. At this level, children come to recognize the structure of simple pieces. And they have the capacity to make music with others in simple pieces. It's a nice example here of Liam. Now, interestingly, Liam can't sing in tune very well because of his physical difficulties. But he shows he understands the structure of simple songs by playing the harmonies on an omnichord. I think you'll recognize this song after a minute or so. Doing Freddie Mercury proud. So you can tell from Liam's playing that he has a complete grasp of the harmonic structure of Don't Stop Me Now. But it would be easy to overlook his musical abilities if you only listened to his singing. And one of the key messages today is that children must be given the opportunity to show their musical enjoyment, engagement, and abilities in any way that you can imagine them doing it. So it's really important they have the opportunities to play pitched instruments like keyboards and harps and guitars, and not just simple percussion instruments. If you just have a drum, you can only play a drum. If you have a piano, who knows, you might play a Rachmaninoff piano concerto. Finally, at level 6, we have the wider world of music. Now, this normally happens in the teenage years, and it's sort of thought that autistic children don't understand the cultural and emotional importance of music. Again, that's just a myth. It's a misunderstanding. Here is a boy from Germany I worked with called Mika. Mika has a severe visual impairment, and he's on the autism spectrum. But he's an amazing multi-instrumentalist. Like the other children you've seen, like Romy, like Liam, Mika has absolute pitch or perfect pitch. And he loves to improvise and to multi-track. And here he is in action playing Summertime by George Gershwin. So if you want to see Mika, he's on the internet. His name online is Mika Rocky Mai. That's in the German spelling, M-A-I. Mika Rocky Mai. So to sum up this part of the talk, the Sounds of Intent framework of musical engagement identifies 6 levels in which people make music or respond to music. They are learning to hear, sounds interesting, copy me, copy you, bits of pieces, whole songs, and the wider world of music. And there are 3 different ways in which people engage with music and musical sounds, which are reactive, proactive, and interactive. And these can be represented as a set of concentric circles. Now, all of this information is online at soundsofintent.org, and you can download the framework so you can use it with your pupils and students. Now, the Sounds of Intent project is much more than just a theoretical framework. Over the last 10 or 15 years, we've used it as the basis to create lots of different resources to different groups of children. So, for example, there are sets of songs and activities for blind and partially sighted children as part of the Amber Trust, which is a charity I run here in the UK for visually impaired young people. There's another set of resources for children with complex needs at Soundabout. There's another set called Tuning In to Autism, which is available on that website. And we've just finished a set of resources for deaf and hard of hearing children as part of the Imagine project. I guess of those 4 different areas of work, the one that surprised me the most was those for deaf and hard of hearing children. I worked with a group of deaf musicians over 2 or 3 years to really tune in to what young deaf children were making of music. And the result is quite extraordinary. We worked with a wonderful woman called Ruth Montgomery. And if you go to that website, you'll see her amazing work with deaf children. Sounds of Intent also underpins the design of a new, fully inclusive set of music resources called Count Me In. Count Me In is for all children and young people, including those with the most profound needs and those with special musical abilities too. It comes as a print book, and I had one, Nisha, in my suitcase to give you, but I'll have to post it anyhow. There are also a lot of resources online at that web address, www.soundsofintent.org/countmein. All these websites, I hope, will be on a handout that you should get at the end of the talk. So Count Me In consists of 12 music projects to undertake with children. They're very varied stylistically and culturally, and they range from rap to medieval music, from reggae to Bollywood. There's lots of different examples you can see online. And those are the 12 titles. They're also designed to be fun, of course, that's very important. I'll just give you one example. Here's a piece called Water Blues. I'll just play a bit of the music for you. You'll hear what happens in the music. It starts with sounds, then there's a beat, then there's motifs, and then there's a song. And so there's materials there for every young person to get involved with. At level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, and level 6 of Sounds of Intent. Here we go.
Water, water, everywhere, it's pouring down with rain. It pitters and patters all over the roof and gurgles down the drain. Water, water, everywhere, it's pouring down with rain.
We have the rain light sound. Then there are set out different activities for children and young people at different levels. Here's the level 2 that I call the sound makers, the sensory learners. Materials for pattern makers, those functioning at level 3, like the steady drip of rain, for example. Activities for motif makers at level 4, like ba, 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 bum. They can play these little hooks or riffs. And for those functioning at level 5 or 6, music makers, there's the whole piece written out. There's also materials for music teachers to use. And we just put together a video a few months ago of children using Water Blues. So here is Water Blues in action. Count Me In is a set of inclusive music resources. There are 12 different topics, and they are made so that anyone
has a part to play. Whether you have profound and multiple learning difficulties, moderate learning difficulties, or indeed on the autism spectrum, there's something for you to join in.
Count Me In consists of a book which looks at the different levels of the Science of Intent developmental framework. It also explores a set of 12 pieces that have different themes.
Each activity is a different musical genre, a different style. There are parts for sound makers, children who are at the sensory stage of development, for pattern makers, who perhaps are tapping a regular beat, for motif makers, who are making these shapes and sound, the little ring tones that we like, the memes, and music makers, people who can sing or play the whole song.
There is a website where there are backing tracks for each of the songs and also individual sounds that the participants in special schools can access.
On the website you can get sounds for each of the songs, and I've built a sort of project here in GarageBand so I can... These sounds are freely available in the resources, they're part of the website, and I just put them into my iPad just as a way to interact with them quickly.
The great thing with Count Me In is that you don't need to be an advanced musician in order to use it. You can download the tracks from the website and you can get going with it straight away. Very often in schools, the children and young people are in quite mixed ability groups. Even within a class of children with profound disabilities, there are very often very different levels of musical ability. What Count Me In offers is a fully inclusive music making resource. So anyone with any level of musical engagement can join in at the same time.
This kind of session really benefits our children. Obviously, being PMLD, a lot of our children are non-verbal, so it's a different way to express themselves, I guess. All of our children seem to enjoy the sessions, and we can gauge from their body language, their vocalising, obviously that they're engaging and joining in and enjoying themselves.
Count Me In was developed really to help and support and give confidence to teachers in special schools who are non-music specialists, as very few special schools have their own music specialists in-house. It was also designed to help and support music teachers going into these settings who maybe didn't have a lot of experience or just wanted new ways to make sure that all the children and young people with widely differing abilities and needs could be included.
I feel like the Count Me In project really caters for these different varying abilities and is able to let everyone access it in their own way and actually stay engaged within a classroom situation.
The best way to use Count Me In is for someone from a music service, a music specialist, working with a teacher in a special school to work together to give the very best for their pupils and students.
One of the great things about Count Me In is that all staff feel they're able to interact musically and engage musically with the young people, including teachers' assistants and class teachers, and it really gives everyone a sense that everybody is musical. You don't need specialist music training to do this work.
I think it's quite easy. Obviously, we did the training sessions. It's all quite straightforward, and it's easy to deliver with the children, I think, and get them to engage. It's not too complicated, I think, with PMLD students to sort of deliver it and get them to engage.
The smiles and the kind of engagement and the curiosity with the instruments, and clearly young people were having a lot of fun. A young person who was perhaps less expressive in the last session I was in was nodding along and exploring the rhythm and was clearly responding to that. And for some people that might be difficult to notice the subtleties, but I felt like it really brought a level of enjoyment to the session, which also the TAs and the staff here have commented on that it's been a really fun session both the times that we've done this.
They was engaged within like 10-15 seconds, which normally in a music session takes them a long time, especially if they're in their chairs, because they're quite confined to what they normally do. Whereas today's session, they're out of the chairs and they engage very quickly, and they enjoyed the instruments, which was brilliant.
A lot of the PMLD classes we've been looking at, they really benefit from that multisensory approach to sound making and exploring elements that way. So I've tried to incorporate that into how I've delivered some of the sounds. So the thumb piano, I've attached blue ribbons along to it, and we've had physical sounds that you'd hear in everyday life, like water bottles chugging, and I've emphasised those with like lights and things like that. So just going that extra step to kind of cater for everyone's needs.
It's wonderful to see, especially in a class with really mixed abilities and needs, the young people's faces lighting up when they realise that they made that sound, or that they're intentionally doing it that themselves. And I think working with technology really helps to open up those opportunities to young people, really open up that world of group music making, and also of agency for young people who may not have that in other areas of their life.
The use of the iPads is really beneficial. We've been using the Clarion app, as well as some other ambient sounds apps, just to allow for more pattern makers and motif makers to kind of be able to express in the right keys along with the song. I'm
using sort of gestural touch instruments within GarageBand. GarageBand is a resource that I see quite often in schools. And I actually, in our little ensemble of music leaders, I assigned myself the role of bass player. So I've actually been playing the bass with this quite pleasing sound. What's been really cool, simple little sort of hack, I took the portable speaker out of my kitchen and it's got a really pleasing vibration, so I've actually been putting that with participants, letting them hold it, or maybe putting it on their knee so they can really feel the bass and get a kind of haptic, kind of tactile sensation of the sound as well.
We're looking at the song Water Blues, and I've chosen to look at this for the whole length of the half term, because there's lots of elements to kind of branch out and kind of dive deep into and have a look at with each of the verses, and lots of multi-sensory aspects we can kind of focus on for each week.
We was fascinated how quick they was interested and how still they sat, because normally when our children, because they're SLD children, they're quite active and movement and they're very distracted by different things, but in that session they were able to sit for a long period of time and explore, so we were very happy with that.
It's a very flexible session where the children can engage and be themselves and express themselves, which makes it a lot more enjoyable for the children, I think.
The songs just really lend themselves so well to these settings and the resources are really, really clear. I am being unashamedly evangelical about these resources. I think they're fantastic and I'm working in loads of settings and I'm just recommending them to everybody.
Water everywhere is what we're mostly made of.
There we go. So that gives a little flavour of Count Me in action. Great. Couple more things before I finish. The Sounds of Intent framework now forms the basis for a new nationally regulated qualification in the UK, which actually can be taken up anywhere in the world through our national centre, which is www.soundsofintent.com. So people in Slovenia would be very, very welcome to enter their pupils. If you look on the Trinity website, which is here, you'll see that any young person, any child, any adult can enter for a music development certificate. And these aren't token qualifications. These are very, very well planned, very structured ways of celebrating children's musical engagement. But do have a look at the Trinity College website. We also offer a course at the University of Roehampton for teachers and teaching assistants and parents. It can be taken, it's a postgraduate course, so it's like part of a master's course, and you can take it anywhere. It can be fully online, and it can be synchronous or asynchronous. Again, all these websites are hopefully on a handout that you'll get from Katerina. So thank you very much. There's my immediate contact details. Now I look forward to hearing your questions and comments and thoughts. Thank you. Thank you. Katerina, I can't hear you.
Dear Adam, I wasn't speaking, so yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your inspiring talk, as always, I would say. Just watching you, what you're doing is like a miracle. So thank you for all these miracles that you're doing and your music community. And now it's time, I'm going to speak in English, okay? Now it's time for your questions. Please, I would give you the microphone to address it to Adam. And don't worry, you don't get handouts, but you'll get PPTs. So you'll get everything that Adam lectured today, you'll get it via mail. So it's your turn now. Let's co-create this event together. Are there any questions? You know us Slovenes, Adam. We are always shy at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, maybe they ask in Slovenian, then you could translate.
Ja, you can, lahko vprašate tudi po slovensko, pa bom jaz prevedla. Tako da, če bi kdo vprašal po slovensko, ni nobenega problema, bom jaz prevedla. Okay, we have the first one. Boš v slovenščini v angliščini?
I would just like to know, so what was your start with education for special needs? What was your motive? What is your story from the beginning, and what was some challenges that you on the way that you got them?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So when I studied music at a conservatoire in London at the Royal Academy of Music 45 years ago, so that's a long time. And a friend said, why don't you come and see some of the children at a school for the blind in London? And I kind of put it off because I thought, oh no, I'll get stuck. Anyway, I did, and I was amazed at how naturally musical a lot of the children were. And a lot of the children actually were what we now call autistic. But 45 years ago, the word autistic wasn't really used very much. We just thought the children were eccentric, I think. Anyhow, that started a lifelong interest in how people who are different, with different abilities, make music so effectively. All the children at the school were intensely interested in music. They were natural musicians. They didn't read music, but they played by ear. They could improvise. They could remember everything that you taught them. And from that, I got interested in music psychology, how the brain processes music. And so my research interests and my teaching interests really came together in the Sounds of Intent framework. You asked what the biggest challenge is. I think the biggest challenge initially was attitudes. And I guess in some ways it still is, but less today. So people didn't believe that children with disabilities could be so good at music. I think it's as simple as that. people see a child with severe disabilities and assume that, you know, there's not much hope for them in terms of musical engagement. But nothing could be further from the truth. So people like Romy, for example, I think her parents tried 3 or 4 different teachers and therapists. But because Romy is Romy, she's challenging. She doesn't do what you ask her to do. You have to go with the flow. But if you go with the flow, then the rewards for Romy and for you as a teacher are enormous, because she's such fun to work with. And I think, above all, to finish, I think teaching and working with young people with different abilities and disabilities teaches us a lot about ourselves. I think I've become a much better musician and a much better teacher from spending a lifetime working with differently abled young people. Hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Adam. Any other questions? I'm sure.
Hello. My question is, did you have any experiences with meltdowns in autistic students at your practice? You know, I'm always worrying if I will trigger a kid to the point with the sound that he will or she would have a meltdown. And I'm afraid if I will be able to handle the situation.
Sure. So some of the work I do, like you saw in the videos, is one-to-one at the university. And I wouldn't deliberately upset a child and cause them to have a meltdown. But sometimes it just happens. And I think provided you have a clear, I always work with parents as well. So when I'm working one-to-one, I have a parent in the room for safeguarding reasons, really. And so if a child has, it gets very upset or distressed, and Romy, not so much now, when she was little, for example, she would absolutely have meltdowns. And it could be very hard to figure out why. It could just be a note or a chord that caused it. But I think because I discussed with her parents beforehand what we would do if she did get upset, then that was okay. I mean, the reality is children will have meltdowns. That's just part of working with autistic children. In schools, I expect the teaching staff in the school to deal with a child who's very upset. And they have their own protocols for dealing with things. And of course, before I start working with a child, I talk to the parents and their teachers and find out the kind of things that they enjoy and the kind of things that might upset them. Having said all of that, I think children on the spectrum can sometimes be learning most effectively when you push them a bit. I think the art of teaching them is to know just how hard to push things. Otherwise, the danger is if you're too frightened to do things in case they get upset, then you end up being squashed into a black hole of doing exactly only what they want. And of course, teaching it's a negotiation, isn't it? I listen and very much go with their interests, but also I wouldn't be a teacher if I didn't try to have a shared vision for them of moving forwards, of doing new things, of trying new things. And that's, for me, the fascinating balance.
Vprašanja se kar odpirajo, tako da jaz verjamem, da evo, naslednje vprašanje. Kako smo lepo pretočni. We are so much in flow.
Hello. So
Hello.
I'm just asking what would be your advice for the teachers that is their first time, so they came across with those kind of children. Some advice to start everything when you're so maybe scared to try doing that.
Yeah. I mean, if possible, I suppose the first thing is all children are different. People always say, give me a list of 10 things to do with an autistic child. And I can't, because the 10 things I suggest might not work with your autistic child, or indeed with the same child on a different day, because just because you're autistic doesn't mean you conform to a stereotype. So if I'm working with a child, I try to spend some time observing them first. So I quite like to go, if I'm working privately, I get to meet the family and we just have a chat. If the child wants to play me something or talk about what they want, that's absolutely fine. Or if not, then I ask the parents sometimes for videos of the children, if they're making sounds or whatever it is they do normally at home. I work with a lot of non-verbal children, and some videos of them in everyday life can be really helpful. In terms of what to do, I think there are lots of ideas on the Sounds of Intent website. And if you look at the Count Me In resources, for example, there are lots and lots of suggestions. And also on the other websites, on the Amber Trust and Soundabout and the Tuning Into Autism and Imagine, there are literally hundreds of strategies of things to try. I think we mustn't be afraid of making mistakes. I still get it wrong because we do, we're only human. And I think it's better to try things and then say, oh, that didn't work, let's try something else. It's inevitable. So I think be patient and be a good listener and a good observer for your child, and hopefully find a way forward. I always start where the child is at. I say, what are you interested in? Or I ask their parents what they like to listen to. It might be a particular thing on, on the internet, a particular advert or a particular song. And usually I try to start with that. I show them how to play part of it, for example, and then they become very interested.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for all. I've heard a lot of times that absolute pitch and musicality doesn't get along very good. So I wonder what's your opinion, because we heard that a lot of children with disabilities, especially with autism, have absolute pitch, and you've also said that it absolutely isn't true that they're not musical. So I would like to know what you think about this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. So something like 40%, that's 2 out of 5 children who are born blind will develop absolute pitch. And about 5 to 10% of children on the autism spectrum have absolute pitch. And I don't know who said absolute pitch is not a musical quality. I absolutely is. Almost all the great composers had absolute pitch. About 25% of professional musicians have absolute pitch. So it's simply not true. The big advantage for children who have autism and learning difficulties is that they hear sound in their heads very, very strongly if they have absolute pitch. And that means when they come to play an instrument or to sing, it's much, much easier for them. I always play things in this, if I'm learning a song, we always sing it in the same key. So they learn it as an absolute, and then we can transpose it. So all the children I work with, even Romy, you could hear Romy playing the Smetana in different keys. Having absolute pitch doesn't stop you transposing. In fact, it makes it easier because you have such a strong model of pitch in your head. So for me, absolute pitch makes teaching much, much easier.
Thanks.
Hello, thank you for all the beautiful things you've said and showed to us. It was really, really amazing, the work that you're doing. I'm wondering, are you teaching also neurotypical children? And if yes, how different is this for you? Or is it? Or would it be?
Yes, that's really interesting. So when I started out, I think I started teaching, like lots of musicians, to earn some money when I was a teenager. So I think in the end, I had about 50 pupils when I was in my early 20s who were neurotypical, as well as the special needs ones. I think these days I don't have time to take on neurotypical children because I think they can easily find a teacher somewhere else. Having said that, because friends are always asking, at the moment I teach 2 neurotypical children, and I think what teaching children who are different has taught me is to be a better teacher. So I'm much more pupil-centered than I used to be. I very much try to embrace what the child's interests are and try to make them the best musician they can be for what they want to do. That doesn't mean I don't teach technique and all of that. And I teach them to read music if that seems helpful. But it's not the most important thing. So a child, for example, one child I teach, his father is a folk musician who doesn't read music, and the child just wants to be like his father. So, I teach him by ear. Another child really wants to learn to read music and to understand music theory. So I'm very happy to teach them that. But I don't just teach them pieces. I teach them to improvise. I teach them to play by ear. I teach them to play with other children. I teach them to love different kinds of music. So overall, I think teaching children who are different has really helped my general teaching of children who are more typical, I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I have a bit different question. You presented us an approach a lot different from what we're used to for teaching music. And I'm wondering how you feel about music theory lessons. Are they important? And for which children? Are they important for kids with special needs? And are they important for neurotypical children?
Sure. Yep, so I really strongly believe in sound first. So when I start working with a child, whoever they are, I don't start with theory. I start with, let's make some music to get the child immediately engaged and keen. Then, if the child is able to understand music theory, I introduce it in the context of making music. So, for example, I might say to them, it's great just learning by ear and not thinking about anything to do with the language that we use to talk about music. But there is a system of notation out there that would make you more independent, for example. And some children, so people like Romy would have no understanding of music theory. She doesn't really have language. So And you don't need music theory to be an advanced musician. I think that's very important. So I teach autistic savants. There's one called Derek Paravicini, who has severe learning difficulties. In fact, he came and played in Ljubljani about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And he can play anything at all. And he is an amazing musician, but he still gets the names of the notes muddled up. But that doesn't mean, in other words, you don't need any music theory to be a great musician. But if you want to do certain kinds of music making, like classical music making, if you want to perform in a, you know, like a Baroque music group, then it's really helpful to understand what Baroque composers thought about music theoretically. And some children I work with, including the autistic children, really love music theory. For them, that's the way in, and they get absolutely fascinated. So I teach some advanced music theory as well. You know, orchestration and harmonization and you know, writing complex scores. So I try to be child-based. If music theory is something that interests them and will be helpful to them, then certainly I'll teach it. If it's not going to be, I don't. The most important thing is making music.
Thank you.
Mm. They're keeping you busy, Katerina.
Hello, and yet again,
Hello.
Thank you so much for all of your wonderful work. My question would be, as someone who wants to embark on the journey of going into music therapy and working with disabled children, the only thing that's stopping me as of right now is the fact that I feel that I will not be able to guard myself emotionally. So how would you approach that? Do you have any advices in regards to that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm not a music therapist. So there is a separate training for music therapists. And one of the things they do in the training is to help therapists deal with their own emotional responses to the children they work with. To be honest, I just feel very positive about the children I work with, even when they're having a bad day or even when they're very sick, because you can see the impact that music has. Having said that, the families and the children become friends as well. And if they are very sick or if they pass away, which Abby did, then of course I get upset as well. But in a way that's part of life, isn't it, I suppose? And if you feel like I worked with Abby for the last 3 or 4 years of her life, and hopefully what we did working with parents and teachers, we improved the quality of her life for those last few years. And so that felt like an important thing to do, even though I was really, really sad when she died. And I remember playing her favorite piece at her funeral, and I felt that was something to do for the parents that was really important. I had a similar feeling actually working with people, older people with dementia. I thought I would be too emotionally affected by it to try. And it was only about 6 or 7 years ago that I thought I will have a go. Maybe it's because I'm getting old myself. And actually I found, much to my surprise, it was a joyful thing, because people with dementia live in the moment. They absolutely love music and singing and dancing, and it's just joyous, really. So very often I leave a home for people with dementia quite energized and uplifted, because the people have had such a good experience and given me such a lot. That's the great thing. So music therapy, to summarize, music therapy, you'll get training in dealing with your emotions. If you want to do what I do, which is really education, then maybe try it and see. But all the people I know who work in the field don't find it emotionally too difficult. They actually find it very positive. Of course, sad things happen, but overall, the positive things outweigh the negative things.
Hello, my name is Nate. Thank you for your wonderful introduction and presentation. So I would like to ask about parents. Do you include also parents? Do they get also musical support from you, or it's your work only based, it's in domain of you and the child, or how do parents participate in and interact?
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So to me, we are a team. So we have the parents, the child, me, and maybe also their teacher at school. And it's important that the child knows that this is something that we're all engaged in. That's my philosophy. And so when I'm working with the more disabled children and the more autistic children, the parents always sit in the room with me. That is mainly for safeguarding reasons, because the children can be very unpredictable. They might take their clothes off, or they might jump on my knee or something, which is fine. I don't mind, but I want it to be absolutely clear with the parents that, that this is all appropriate. It just happens sometimes with autistic children. In terms of some parents, not many, but some are themselves musicians. And so it's lovely to get involved with them. With the parents who aren't themselves musically trained, there's lots of resources on those websites with ideas of activities that the parents can do themselves. They don't need to be able to play an instrument, for example. I very, very strongly believe that I'm just one link in the chain, and that really the most important people are the parents. And so their engagement with their child's musical learning is really, really important. And they really enjoy it as well. So just thinking again of Romy, Romy's father is amazing. He's so dedicated, but he's not a musician himself. But he's discovered so much about his daughter from watching her engage in music. And he loves the lessons, not because of the music, but because of the psychology, because of the way that Romy interacts with me and with other musicians. I always try to get other musicians to come in as well. So if you're in London and you're a musician, you must come in, as Nusha did, and enjoy the sessions as well. I think above all, music is a social act. And the more people who are involved in music making in a child's life, the better.
Hello, thank you for your lecture. I have a question about people with brain stroke. Do you maybe have any experience with musical therapy or faster rehabilitation after brain strokes? Thank you.
Yes, I don't myself work with stroke patients, especially, though people like Romy actually is a stroke patient. That's what she had when she was a baby. So a lot of the children I work with have similar damage. So they might be hemiplegic, for example, through cerebral palsy, which is a very similar effect. And of course, a lot of the older people I work with also have had strokes. I think there's wonderful music therapy evidence that music can be really helpful as a motivation to move if you want to play something, and also because it helps the brain rewire itself. One of the most extraordinary things I've learned working with older people with dementia and strokes and other problems is their ability to learn new things. So I assumed that when I went to work with older people that we would just sing the songs that they knew from their childhood. But it's not true at all. They can learn new songs, new materials, because the brain is constantly trying to rewire itself to learn new things. And if there's brain damage, I think music, as I say, can provide a motivation to try to get that rewiring going. It's not like someone, you know, if they've had a stroke and they can't move their left hand, for example, it's not suddenly going to get better, but music may provide the motivation to gradually improve. When Romy was a little girl, she didn't use her left hand. I don't think she knew her left hand existed, but it was through playing the piano, because she's quite motivated to do that, obviously. Actually, her left hand function has improved hugely, and that's just through music making. So I guess, in summary, with children, it's easier to try to, because their brains are still more plastic, to use music and you can achieve more. With older people, it's going to be slower, but music can still have a good impact. Finally, if you look up things like Parkinson's disease, music is extraordinary in helping Parkinson's patients move and even dance. There's lots of lovely evidence online of that.
Thank you, dear Adam. Thank you, dear audience. We came to the end. And thank you for all the questions we shared together. I heard, Nusha, that you're coming in spring. Are you coming?
Me?
Yeah, hopefully you are.
Yes.
I would just like also to thank our technical staff, because of the unfortunate circumstances, they were like in a moment here, prepared for everything. So Matic, Tilen, Karim, hvala. Big applause for our staff. It was a little bit stressful for us, but I was talking to Adam and I was talking to Nusha and Carolina, and I said, you know, we are experientially learning how important it is just to accept what it is and then find a solution. And that's flow of life. And if you have music and good people, solution is here. So thank you, Adam, for joining us. See you live soon. Bye.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.